welcome back to episode 3. In the last clip we did for you, we went through the priming stage. So we've done the bare steel, we've got our coats of primer on. I used the film thicknessing comb so we could test the thickness as we went along. Now, this is dry, so how do we know now that we've got the right amount on before we can move on to our undercoating stage? What we use is a little dry film thickness tester, a little battery operated number. They're not expensive, whether you want to add that into your project. 150, 160 quid will sort you out. You can get them cheaper. To be honest, the more you pay, the better they are in measuring down to the last micron or two. But for this sort of painting, if you're within 10 microns, you're more than close enough. We're talking about infinite, absolutely tiny amounts there. So this one more than does what we ask. Now, I said to you that the first coat we put on would actually soak into the steel, even though we were measuring it and seeing that we got the right amount of paint on. Rather than me put 5 coats on, I just want to show you 3 coats. You often hear people say, oh, a couple of coats of primer is enough. They're not really going by any particular guideline. So this has had 3 coats, and all you do with these things, just hold them on, you'll hear it bleep, and then you get a little digital display there. So on one of our full repaints, we have a schematic of the boat, and then we test areas, so we get an average coating over the whole boat, including the roof. Now, roofs, because of their flat nature, you always get more paint on. It's just the way it works. On a cabin side, you tend to find, often as not, you'll want the extra coat. So sometimes we've got 5 coats, sometimes 6. And it sounds a bit as if we're not very good at putting on an even layer. That isn't really the case. What happens is that when you get paint from manufacturers, the solid content in the paint can vary, and small variations will make a difference as to how thick your coatings are. Again, this is why it's so good if you can actually test what you've put on to see what you've got. Now, as I say, you just hold this little gadget on, there's the bleep, and it's told me I've got 54 microns in that place, and if I move it over here, 56. So it's fairly even all over. That's on 3 coats. So the first one we'd hardly have measured. We've managed around about 30 microns on the next couple of coats. This is averaging out. I did a full test of it, and it averaged out about 60 microns. So you've got one that's soaked into the steel and 2 coats on top of that one, which are giving us about a 30 micron reading. So if we go to 4 coats, we'll probably average something similar again. That's going to take us up to 90. So this one's going to take, on the tin of paint I've been using, with the solid content in that, we're looking about 5 coats to get the 120 average on the sides. So it just shows you how, a couple of coats, if we'd have only put 2 coats on this, one of which has sunk into the steel, we'd be looking at about a 30 micron coating, which when you look at the data sheets for various paint manufacturers, that's nowhere near enough to do its job, which is to protect the steel. So very easy to get a little bit caught out with coats, and that's why I wanted to just talk that through with you, because it's the coatings that make the difference. And this multiple coat system, as we've talked about before, those multiple coats stop, if there's dust particles or anything in that surface, it stops the paint being able to work, the moisture or any contaminants to work their way through and get to that steel surface. So the more coats, the better, but they need to be going on at the right thickness so it dries evenly, and then you're good to go. So the next stage for this is an undercoat stage. So I'm just going to stop for a second, and I'm just going to get my undercoat ready, and we'll talk you through that. Okay then, we're all ready with our undercoat stage. Now, again, people talk about, which undercoats, which primers. what I tend to do is stick with the a system, because that always works. You know where you are, you're not mixing and matching lots of different products. In most cases those things are okay, but this is a sort of fail-safe way of doing it. So we've got the International Yacht Primer. That we didn't have to rub down between coats because it chemically bonds. As long as we don't exceed the drying times, absolutely fine. And now I'm going to go on with a blue-grey undercoat, which we pretty much use for all our colours. It's called Pre-Coat. It's an undercoat basically. We use it as a sacrificial coating. So although I'm going to put 3 coats of this on, the actual film thickness that I've achieved at the end of it is fairly irrelevant, as it's all going to get rubbed down and we're going to get a lovely smooth finish. The nice thing about this is once it has dried, it'll rub down really nicely, it'll give us that lovely smooth finish, and it also gives an element of protection as far as moisture is concerned, anything getting to that steel. But the gloss coats that we put on, they're the ones that are going to give it the more weatherproof finish. So pre-coat's our next stage. We tend to use, as I said, the blue-grey. I might use the white if I was going on with cream or something like that, but for any of the general colours we use, the greys, the blues, greens, you want a darkish background anyway, so the blue-grey works perfectly well. As far as application is concerned, I tend not to, I'll be quite honest, I tend not to worry too much about film thickness in this as I do it. But we're also not, emulsion in the front room, so we're not spreading it out until it's really, really thin. So pretty much the same format as before. We wouldn't paint the gunnel in undercoat. That's going to have a coat of Multi 40 on it, which is the proprietary roof deck gunnel paint that we use. So that just goes straight onto primer. So there's no issues there with needing an undercoat. So it's just the actual cabin side itself. Again, if it was a roof, we just build up the primer coats, they get a light key back, and then we'd use the Multi 40 again on roofs, because that's the product which is designed for that job. I'm not keen on putting gloss paint on roofs. I'm not keen on going on to the undercoat and then glossing roofs and putting texture in, only because gloss isn't really designed for that. It wasn't designed as, it doesn't say on the tin, full roofs and decks. It's more the cabin side type paint. It doesn't have the wear that you would expect a roof to take. So we'll discuss that in the Multi 40 when we get to putting it on. But again, process is exactly the same. We're going to go in, fill a roller up. As I said, I'm not film testing this because there isn't really any need. It is sacrificial. We are going to take a lot of it off. So I'm just going to be conscious of not spreading this out as you would, I tend to use that term, emulsion in your front room. As long as it's changed colour and it's the right colour, if you're emulsioning, that's sort of good enough. This, I'm trying to build up a reasonable layer because I want something to sand off, which does sound a bit harsh really. You spend all that money on your undercoat and plaster it on only to sand it off. But that's the way that we can attain that lovely smooth finish. The thing is, if you don't have a decent amount of undercoat on, your problem is going to be when it comes to doing the sanding. Because you'll start sanding, obviously there's lumps and bumps in the steel surface, and before you know it, you're straight through the undercoat, and you're sanding into your primer coats that are doing all the protection as far as the steel's concerned. So you want this undercoat enough on here so that when we do get to that sanding stage, it still remains in undercoat. We haven't sanded the undercoat off completely. We've just flattened everything out nice and smooth, and then we can get that gloss coat on. But I will take you through the whole process. I have done a coach lining video, but we'll still do that on this panel. It's only a very quick process just to run some coats lines on here, and then you'll see me take this undercoat down, so you'll see exactly what we're looking at as far as sanding that undercoat is concerned, and also what we're looking at texture wise, what's acceptable and what isn't. One of the benefits of doing our assisted boat painting is if you have that question of how far do I need to rub that down, is that enough? Our assisted boat painting scheme, I'm there with you. So you can actually ask me, you know, or have a look at this, is that enough, isn't it enough? And that makes a huge difference when you're doing the project yourself, which is basically what our assisted boat painting is. Just to have that professional there, just somebody just to say, yeah, you took that down enough, or no you haven't, and it's going to need a little bit more. Peace of mind really. But the people that have done the whole scheme with us, I've got some more to do this year, have all ended up with boats basically that look like we've painted them. Mostly, most people have the practical skills to paint your own narrowboat, no problem at all. All you really need, and as you can see me doing this, all you need is the facilities, the equipment, and in some cases you'll just need a little bit of guidance, and that's what our assisted boat painting is all about. We're offering you the building, the equipment, and our assistance, and as much as little as you want, and that gives you that opportunity to produce the boat yourself, as rather than bringing it to us, paying extortionate amounts of money for us to do it when you can do it yourself. So a nice little scheme for those people that fancy getting your overalls on and having a go. You can see I'm using a 2-inch brush. I probably wouldn't normally, I just happen to have a 2-inch brush in the box there. Quite alright with a 3-inch doing this. I do gloss nowadays with a roller and a 2-inch brush. I've found using 3 inches and 4-inch brushes, no problem, and in some of my subsequent earlier videos you can see me using 3-inch brushes. No problem. What I have found and what I feel comfortable with is by working in those smaller areas with a 2-inch brush, so we're just working in blocks like this, it's almost as quick using this technique whether you're using a 2-inch brush or a 3-inch brush. But I just feel that we just enhance the actual gloss coat when we do it. As I say, I wouldn't bother with an undercoat, but you do seem to get a very nice finish using the 2. I'm not saying it's a bad finish with the 3. We've just felt that whether it's we are concentrating, going over the same area that a little bit more, allowing for the brush strokes just to melt away, then that's perhaps part of it. For those eagle-eyed amongst you, you might notice when I lay off, every brush stroke is I reverse the brush. I'll just do that more slowly and you might be able to just pick me out doing it. If you paint a whole cabin side using the same side of the brush for laying off, your brush will start to become slightly deformed. It'll pick up more and more paint in one side. You'll find that the bristles of the brush start to separate because they're becoming overloaded, and if in some cases drier or less flexible on the opposite side. So a little combat for that, and I'll just move that out of the way so you can see. So as I come to lay this off, let's smooth that out. So brush in hand, always hold your brush nice and low down by the stock so you've got control of it. Up you go, and you'll see I actually spin mine over as I do it. So once I get to do it, so it's a little turn by the time I've got to the bottom, and that just keeps the brush evenly loaded as far as paint is concerned. I'm not saying you've got to do it, it's just something I do, and I just find that a nice little way of doing it. And you can see my brush stays even. You tend to find you're constantly laying, you know, off one side, the brush will start to bend and shape unevenly, and you don't get quite, bearing in mind it's the ends of the brush here that are actually making the, you know, keeping the paint surface nice and smooth. So by just turning that, it does just help the brush out. You could get, you know, 30 or 40 feet down a cabin side and, you know, go and clean your brush out and get back to where you were, or have a second brush ready. It's having whether you've got the brakes available for you to actually do that. You do tend to end up using the same brush, at least for one side of a boat. So that little twist, as I do it, does seem to just keep your brush nice. It's only little things, but they all add together. So the good thing about this system is I've just got to the end of it. That's not necessarily the good thing, but tomorrow I can come in, no rubbing down, nothing to do with it. If you were in a workshop, you could wipe the surface down just to make sure you've got rid of any dust, and then you're straight on again. These will chemically bond, no need to rub down. So it's a good system, works very well. And the next stage, I'll continue this now up until I've got 3 coats of undercoat and it's ready for sanding. So the next time you see us, we'll get that sanded down, we'll get it coach lined up, and we'll look at getting some gloss on it. Okay, thank you for watching, and catch me on the next one.